John and Johnny, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, likewise.
We're excited.
Yeah, that's awesome. So, just to start us off, why don't you guys tell us a little about what your role is on the team and then how long you've been at Blizzard?
Sure, yeah. I'm Johnny Cash. I'm a senior game designer on the team. I've been on the WoW team for about 7 years. And I am the zone lead for Bastion, which is the zone that's playable here. And I work on the quest team. So we make outdoor content for the world, quests, putting monsters in there, scenarios, all sorts of different stuff like that. It's just storytelling, ultimately.
Nice.
So I'm John Hight, and I'm the executive producer on World of Warcraft. And I started my journey as a fan. So 15 years ago, I was in there playing my little hunter named Bumble. And I've been in a couple different guilds and pretty much raided every week, for those last 15 years. You'd think I'd be a lot better to show for it, but that's what it says. So,
as long as you enjoy it, that's the main thing.
Yeah, I actually started Blizzard 8 years ago.
Okay.
And started on Missa Pandaria as lead producer on the design side. Then went over to Diablo and was production director on Diablo 3 console and Reaper of Souls, and then came back to become the production director in Jab. Moved up to be our executive producer, and then when Jab got promoted to our president, so I just keep following Jab.
Just keep following Jab, so
it's kind of what happens in careers sometimes, right?
Yeah.
That's good. So I want to start by talking about Bastion a little bit. So I got to do the quick demo yesterday.
Yeah, awesome.
And it's clearly like the area of order. I almost think of like the Vorlons in Babylon 5, Gryffindor, and Harry Potter or something along those lines. So what was kind of your inspiration behind not only the zone but the Covenant and everything around Bastion?
That's a great question. One of the things that we knew we wanted to do was, first of all, just present something that isn't the base expectation of an expansion about death. Like, you can't not have the Scourge influence there, which is why Mondraxis exists.
Yeah.
But we wanted to show something that not all souls that die across the worlds of Warcraft go all into Scourge land, right? There's a variety of places. And so then the natural meeting point for that was, we have all this established lore and little snippets of story from across the years of spirit healers and Valkyr and things like that. And so this was a really cool opportunity to explore the origins of that, of where do they come from, or what were they inspired by. And so Bastion is really a place about taking from new souls that arrive there and training them and forming them over thousands of years to become the beings known as the Kyrian. They're kind of the forebearers of what we've seen before.
Makes sense. So one of the things that I'm curious about is it almost seems like, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but are heroes ultimately going to get a choice of which direction they go as far as covenants are concerned?
So yeah, we wanted to tell a sweeping story across all 4 of the covenants. So you've got a good sense of what they're all about, how they interact with each other, what the primary sense of conflict is that we'll be facing. And so this time you're going to go through all 4, so in linear fashion. And then at the end of that, when you reach max level, you'll make a choice about which covenant you want to join.
Okay.
And in joining that, you'll get a special ability that's specific to the covenant, and then you'll also get one that's specific to your class within that covenant.
Gotcha. Yeah, I know in BFA you kind of get to choose which zone you do first. So are you saying it'll be one at a time, or do you get to kind of choose what order?
No, it'll be again. It's linear fashion. So because we wanted, we like the idea of giving you a choice. It was really pretty cool. And in cases where we had self-contained stories, that worked out well. But there's so much interplay between the different covenants, and then ultimately, the jailer and the maw,
of course,
that we wanted to unfold that story, in a consistent way, so that you got the grand scheme of things.
The grand scheme of things, rather than kind of having the story go through the character rather than character going through the story.
Yeah, we could have done it as 4 parallel stories, but they would have been 4 short stories instead of one big novel.
Yes, exactly.
And that's only for your first character. We're I know Ian touched on it a bit, but we're aware that once you've done it the whole time on your first character, and you've established you understand the story and the characters and what these covenants are, on your second character or 12th character, or however many, there's no need for that. And so that's the thing I'm really excited about, is that between your different characters we offer both kind of the old school style of like a Missa Pandaria or Warlords, but then on your alts it's more like Legion or BFA, where you can pick what zone, you can make that choice immediately and join a covenant, because we know that you as a player know kind of what's going on, so we want to make sure that you have more freedom to level up in different ways or in a different order to keep things fresh and interesting.
I mean, speaking of obviously, the zones or the covenants that are involved in there, Ian touched upon it obviously with, the various different sort of like souls that you'll encounter, Uther, Draka as well, and even after many setbacks, Chaothas once more. Was that obviously quite was that a decision that you guys kind of sat down and you said, right, okay, we have the ability to obviously bring in these characters from the past. Who do we want to bring in, and why do we want to bring them in? Is it something that you can kind of explore slightly more with those characters that you couldn't touch upon, obviously, when they were alive?
I mean, they create touchstones for us to give you a better sense of what is that covenant about. Because if you know a bit about, their crimes, misdemeanors, or, acts of valor during their lives, then you have a good sense of, okay, this is why they ended up where they are. Or there might be even some novelty about, why did they end up here? And maybe some aspect you didn't know about, what they were doing. But we think it grounds it a little bit. It helps you understand a little bit better what's happening. And there's certainly going to be an expectation. I mean, you see these great heroes, and villains fall, on the field of battle, and, they move into the Shadowlands. I think their expectation is, well, this confirms it's the Shadowlands because here's their soul again.
I think related to those, obviously I'm the speaker of the board, did you know?
I'm the speaker of the board too.
I've saved the world many times. I get a choice in which covenant I go to. Does the average soul in Azeroth get to choose where they go, or do they end up there based on their deeds?
The way the Shadowlands is constructed is that when you pass, you're confronted by the Arbiter.
Okay.
And the Arbiter is all-knowing and can make a snap decision about you are going, you're probably on. You're such a nice guy. You're gonna go to Bastion. You might end up in Maldraxxus.
I probably.
More of a
but if you have committed just unrepentable sins, you're going to end up in the Maw, and that is just eternal torment. But the process of all of this has actually become, change, and this happened kind of back in Legion time frame. This is part of what Sylvanas recognized and had a hand in. And so that mechanism of the Arbiter sending souls to different covenants hasn't happened for a while.
Okay.
And everything is going into the Maw. And the Maw is literally becoming overloaded with souls, and this was part of her plan.
Obviously, with the various different zones and the player going into that, alongside the souls like Uther, like Chaothas, are we going to have any sort of like NPCs that aren't necessarily that aren't souls? Are we going to see sort of like Bane being there? Are we going to see any of those characters there, possibly engaging with those with those souls that are there? For example, like Bane going in and meeting Ken once again for obviously we don't know what's going on there. Are we going to see anything along those lines, or is it literally just the player character heading into the Shadowlands?
So without going to too much spoilers, right?
Yes,
you don't want to take that away. That'll be really exciting. But when you're first going into the Shadowlands, right, you're going to be called by Bolvar, and he's recently raised all these Death Knights, and he understands that things have gone down, right? This is kind of post the cinematic that we all saw, and you're going to go try to figure things out, and through events you're going to be pulled into the Maw, because that's where the veil was thinnest between Icecrown and the Shadowlands, and you're going to be put straight into kind of the worst place, the place you really don't want to be. And you'll of course fight your way out and claw your way out, otherwise not a very long story. And that will kind of be the impetus for what brings you to these different covenants and why you are helpful to them, why you have this kind of gift. But there will be other heroes of Azeroth with you on that assault on Icecrown to try to figure out what's happening, to try to right the wrongs. And those characters won't necessarily all make it out of the Maw. So some of them are going to be trapped in there, and you're going to have to, over the course of the campaign, work to get them out. And then on the other side, when you are adventuring through the zones, right, you're going to, less so live characters, but all of the major kind of core denizens of each covenant, like the Kyrians, Bastion is a good example. Every Kyrian was once alive, was once a soul from some world, and they have become a Kyrian and ritualistically given up who they used to be. But you'll see and meet people that have pasts, and they'll have varying degrees of how much they remember, how much of their past they still hold on to, and so that's going to play an interesting part too.
So I noticed some of the, forgive me for this, the owl characters. What's the official?
The stewards.
Stewards, yeah.
Yes.
I got the name wrong yesterday. They're little helpers.
But they are, yeah.
I was just calling them Alkin all day.
Everybody loves them. When we did our first internal playtest of Bastion, everybody sent feedback of like, I just love these owl things.
More
They're so
owls,
cute.
more owls.
They have these huge arms. And,
Yeah, we're probably gonna see an allied race Alkin one day. You just gotta do the whole period. You're gonna turn around and have it win that one. So I did see a couple of them talking in the third person even when I was doing the playthrough. So I wonder if that was intentional or if that was just unique to a character, but kind of giving up their identity.
That is so.
Saying,
The non-covenant races, so the stewards being a good example there, are actually endemic to the Shadowlands.
Okay.
So they were not at one point alive. An easy way to think about it is a fire elemental from the Firelands is just of fire, right?
Yes.
So in the same way, a steward is of the Shadowlands, is of death magic, even though they're obviously quite happy and cute. And so they were born, as it were, of this magic, and so they exist to serve Bastion and to help with things. And then, the way they talk is, as we're kind of honing in on their personality, that felt like a good space to give them. They have this kind of short language, very excitable, refer to themselves in the third person.
Gotcha.
And I think that adds to some kind of the cute factor, like why they're so
they're so humble.
just they are. Yeah, they're subservient, but in like a cute way.
Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think you touched upon obviously heroes not coming back from this initial raid on Icecrown Citadel, and talking about some of the obviously the player character being in Shadowlands. I think one of the big questions is we know where people go when they die from Azeroth. They end up in the Shadowlands. What happens obviously if a character dies in the Shadowlands? Is there almost like, do they return to the Shadowlands, or is that them wiped from existence?
No, I mean we actually it's a pretty cool artifact too. Where as you die, I guess, in the Shadowlands, or you're terminated, you'll have a ghost-like character that will then transit back to where you passed on.
Kind of an out-of-body experience.
Yeah.
Okay.
You get reunited with it.
Yeah.
So
It's
kind of like your soul. It represents your soul, and your soul goes back to its representation in the Shadowlands.
Yeah, but it depends what you are. So like the player, they have this special connection that, among other things, is allowing you to, still do corpse runs because, of course, you're going to be able to do that. But if you're of the Shadowlands, then you kind of go back into the great, the cosmos of the Shadowlands, and then your energy will you kind of recycled later, right? So, if you're a soul, you were once alive and you're now dead, and you're a Kyrian and you die. You died. That's your true death, as it were, right? So that's.
There is no more beyond after that.
No, there's not a nested Shadowlands.
The Shadowlands.
That would get confusing.
Yeah, exactly. And the expansions would just never end then.
Yeah.
No, it's a good idea.
Yeah, exactly. Shadowlands
It's something
2.
to keep in the pocket. Maybe.
Yeah, exactly. We've spoken a lot about the story and kind of like the design and stuff like that. Obviously, there's a lot of stuff in there in regards to systems that kind of have surprised a lot of people, especially in regards to the old-friendly nature of the Shadowlands when it comes to deciding where you want to go, and also the ability to kind of work on your endgame progression as you're leveling as well.
Yeah.
Is that something that you guys have taken on board from the past couple of expansions? Obviously, learning from Legion, BFA, and then you kind of came to this agreement of okay, maybe it's time we give the players something that they can kind of really get their teeth into.
I think we've done not just in the Shadowlands, we're doing a complete overhaul of the leveling experience within World of Warcraft.
Right.
And we certainly wanted to take into account, not just new players coming in, but also players that want to play alts. So Shadowlands has this big sweeping story. As Johnny said, we recognize that once you've done it once, you may not want to, go through all the nuance again for your alt. So we gave you some shortcuts there. In the actual leveling experience, if you're a new player, you never played before, we've got a carefully crafted experience where you'll be put in with other new players. You'll learn the mechanics. It's a safe place. You'll actually get to run a dungeon together, and you'll graduate at level 10 and now be ready to take on an expansion. So you'll go to Battle for Azeroth, and you'll level from 10 up to 50. Then at that point, you're ready to go into the Shadowlands to level from 50 to 60.
Right.
Now you notice the numbers just got smaller.
A lot smaller.
That's the only thing that changed.
Yeah.
So, today, if you were to, step in as a level 120 decked out, BFA player, and you'll be effectively a level 50, you'll still be just as powerful. Everything that you're fighting against, everything's going to behave the same way. But by doing that, we allow at each level to give you something cool, some reward for having made it. Now, if you're playing alts, you have a choice from that level 10. you can pick whatever expansion you want to go from 10 to 50 in. So if you want to relive the the stories of Lich King and that experience, you can do that, and it'll feel like a full experience. You'll level a little faster than before these changes happen, but at least you'll be able to get the main story thread.
That's nice.
Okay, that's cool.
It comes down to choice. With leveling being a fantastic example of that, and with everything in the Shadowlands, I think Ian was really striking the right chord of, we're listening and we're playing the game all the time. I know John is. I know I'm playing it every day. And,
right.
Randomness does have a place, right? You don't want it the first time you kill a boss to get the item you need and you're kind of done. But at the same time, you want to feel like you're working towards something.
Right.
Yeah.
And so whether it's loot or leveling or whatever it is, looking at each system individually and trying to see where can we make sure that it feels like a fair system, it feels like you can work towards things. And I think a great new example of a brand new system that's trying to embrace that is the Soulbind system.
Yeah.
So in many ways it's a spiritual evolution of artifacts or Azurite, but with a very clear focus on customization and choice. So you're gonna, as you're journeying through the zones, you're gonna meet certain characters that have kind of a certain affinity with you. You might save them from danger, or vice versa, or whatever it is. And after you choose a covenant, or immediately on an alt, that character is going to offer to engage in this ancient ritual known as soul binding, conveniently, and that's going to tie the two of you like this ephemeral, invisible tie, and you're going to gain some of each other's powers. So when you have these new class abilities, like the Warrior Spirit Bastion, there's effectively a talent tree that goes with each soulbind, and you're both going to have different choices you can make. So like this or that, that will change things about your character, about your new ability, things that you can completely customize with things out in the world, and also just kind of a different vibe and theme. So a good one that will be covered today is Theotar the Mad Duke, one of the characters from Revendreth. If you soulbind with him, he's a very arrogant character. He's like an aristocrat, right?
Yeah.
And his kind of passive, the starting effect you get, just as your first point sort of thing, is an ability called Arrogance. And if you have a higher health percentage than your enemy, you have more crit against them. Whereas not just Mistblade, one of the other options you would have, her basic ability is increases your parry, and if you don't know how, she teaches you how.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that's just the beginning. Then there's a whole, more abilities that keep adding effects.
Yeah.
So even if John and I both pick Revendreth, and we both use Nadja because she's super cool,
Sure.
and we have different customizations, and I'm a healer and he's a tank, we might have different things slotted into there to further customize it, and that feels like we might both like that character, but we actually have very different gameplay experiences depending on what works best for our class. So it's not going to be parry is the best for tanks, so every tank ever is going to pick Nadja, and that's the end of it. That's not how it's going to be. That might be a draw, but there's going to be a lot of different interwoven pieces. I think it's going to be really engaging.
We hope to keep the theory crafters really busy with this.
Lots
of permutations, and some of them are going to be very situational.
That was probably going to be sort of like a follow-on question from that. Is obviously theory crafters will always go very, very in depth when it comes to making sure they get the maximum sort of like DPS outside of their character. Obviously, you've got the soul binding thing going on. You guys, are you focusing on trying to, like you said, trying to keep it so there isn't a tanks must take this and DPS must take this? You kind of want to have it be a little bit more.
That's certainly our goal. And if you look at Torghast, which is our replayable system, roguelike dungeon, everything changes in there.
Yeah.
But ultimately what you're doing is, aside from just proving how, incredibly cool you are by being able to progress up that tower, is that you're going to be acquiring runes and crafting your own legendary or guiding where your legendaries are going. And you can only equip one at a time, but you can have a whole bevy of them. They're not weapons, they are equipable items. And the aspects of those legendaries will allow you to kind of customize, well, am I going to go in and do a mythic dungeon? Am I going to do a raid? Am I going to do PvP?
Yeah.
And so kind of have all those arrows in your quiver, so to speak.
Ready to go.
Yeah.
So speaking of systems a little bit, we talked about the last couple of expansions and a little bit of lessons learned and kind of what you're changing. Let's talk about Classic for a second. So obviously Classic are probably way more successful than folks imagined it would be, maybe.
It's been awesome.
Yeah?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, very different systems in that game, right?
Yeah.
Is there anything that you realize, people are loving in Classic that you've kind of taken to heart and are maybe making changes in retail based on what you're seeing in Classic?
I think it's a combination of, there's things that we say, oh yeah, we almost forgot that.
Yeah.
Let's make sure we don't forget that
Yeah.
in working on Shadowlands. And then it also kind of reaffirms some assumptions that we've made anyway,
Okay.
which is good, to see that behavior. Certainly making sure that the world feels like a dangerous place.
Okay.
So restoring some of that, I mean, it's very different nowadays when, you look at the deck that any character has in modern WoW.
Yeah.
Damage mitigation. You can handle pretty much anything that comes
Sure
at
can.
you. You're like a super uber being compared to in
Speaking
Classic. I mean, I'm playing a warrior in Classic, and I know that eventually, when I get all the good gear, he's
Right.
going to be one of the most
Yeah.
treacherous things in the game. But
Yeah.
right now,
Yeah.
every time I see a priest running past, I'm like, hey, want to group together?
Yeah, for sure.
You got what I need, and I got what you need. Let's
Exactly.
go. And that interdependency. So I think that's important.
Okay.
I think that looking at all the systems that we introduce and asking ourselves, how can we put a lot of attention to being able to play solo, but I think it's important to ask ourselves, well, how can it be improved by us playing together?
Yeah.
And how can we even encourage people to do it without banging them over the head and forcing them to play together?
Makes
And
sense.
it's a tricky thing, right?
It
Because
is.
people can generally be a little bit introverted, and maybe you just kind of want to log in and kind of do your thing. But the game is so much better when you're playing with others,
Yeah.
Makes sense.
And so I think it is definitely causing us to incorporate that, ask those questions on everything that we're doing.
Yeah,
I think. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just think a lot of it's design philosophy more so than I don't think the right
Exactly.
answer is let's make warriors in Shadowlands play literally exactly like warriors in Classic. I think warriors in Shadowlands and in BFA feel awesome. I really enjoyed the rotation. But there are a lot of things about Classic that we can learn from, and I think it's much more about learning than
Sure.
copying or lifting. And so when we're talking about danger in the world, the Maw's super heavily inspired by Classic and the dangers there, and then the lack of safe havens and options available to you there. When we're talking about options on classes just because buttons are cool, like Eyes of the Beast or Ritual of Doom or Paladin Auras, like just things that feel cool to have, even if they aren't necessarily super complex or they just feel like something that is
Add
immersive.
flavor.
Yeah, they're immersive. They feel like part of the world, and so we're looking at a lot of different stuff from Classic in that perspective of what can we learn from what feels good about this, and how can we apply that to the modern game? Because as far as Classic is Classic, and now people can play that, so that exists for people that want that exact experience. We want to know how can we make Shadowlands better for being able to look at Classic and play it. So we play both. I play both.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
I think everyone at this point has dipped their toe into Classic at the very least. I think
Time for one more question.
One more question. It's a bit of it's sort of like a double header in a way, and it's one that I know my guild have fought over many times. Obviously, you guys introduced personal loot and took out master loot alongside that, and that kind of go hands in hand with time forging, war forging, and the like. You've done in patch 8.3. Obviously, we've got the corrupted mechanic replacing the time forging and war forging.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that's continuing into Shadowlands where we have a replacement for that system? And if so, is it going to affect personal loot in a way so you can't trade anything that does Warforge, Titanforge, or are we seeing an end to that and bringing back master loot to a certain degree?
I mean, yeah, the corrupted items in 8.3 are a great example of, we know that people aren't, entirely happy with the way that the system works now, and so we're taking some things that also feel very cool and thematically tied to what's going on in 8.3, and we're trying some different things that we think will make that experience feel better. And so when we're looking at Shadowlands, we want to learn from how that's received and how that's going.
Yeah.
And so, obviously we are also hard at work on Shadowlands and making lots of changes there, but we want to make sure that we're taking things one step at a time and trying to see, what's working and what still needs improvement from there. So that's, I think, is the current plan, is to just keep going and keep learning from there. And so I think that's going to get us to a place where over time we keep making the system better.
Yeah.
Yeah, we want to give you the ability to chase, specific items and have some degree of agency over how you modify them. I don't think we're going to see a return of Mastery Loot, and as much as it's something that is useful for kind of high-end guilds, especially the leaders of those guilds, to make those tough decisions about, I'm sorry, you just don't get this, I'm giving it to you.
Exactly.
You showed up and you've only been here like 3 times.
Yeah.
You know, and for people that are really min-maxing, we understand that that's a desirable thing, but we also understand that you know, a healthy guild can find ways to communicate and make those, you know, sacrifices, if you would, for the betterment of the guild, and not run the risk of having that system being used against new players, new people coming in and trying to be part of the group. And not necessarily understanding those loot mechanics and wondering, well, wait a minute, what? I came in here and I got nothing. You know, that doesn't feel fair.
Okay.
So it's unfortunate because Mastery Loot brought so many negatives along with it that's why we've kind of shied away from it.
Okay. That's fair enough.
Well, guys, really appreciate you taking some time with us.
Thank
we're
you
excited
very much
about the expansion.
Oh, massively excited. We're obviously going to be playing it later on today, so we look forward to getting really hands-on with that and seeing exactly what we can do with Bastion.
They said this was the Blizzcon to be at.
And they weren't wrong. They were not wrong to be here.
Awesome.
It's a great show.
So did we surprise you with the opening cinematic?
Oh, massively.
Cool.
The video that we have of us reacting to it is full of lots of moments of me kind of just going, what is happening? and why is it there and not in my hands right now?
That's right. Well, thanks again, guys.
Cool.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you so much.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.